Welcome to the LA Business Podcast, a forum for business owners and senior executives to share the experiences about the elements that drive their success. Your host is Robert Brill, CEO of Brill Media.co, an Inc. 500 company delivering the power of hyperlocal advertising. Robert writes for Forbes, Inc. and ad trade publications. Our goal is to bring you the stories about successes and failures of people who are making big things happen in marketing, entrepreneurship, and management.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the LA Business Podcast. Today we have Sasha Der Avanessian, the founder and CEO of Harvest Dental Products. Great to have you, Sasha. Tell us about yourself and Harvest Dental Products.
Well, first off, Robert, thank you so much for inviting me on the podcast. That really is a pleasure. My background is a very simple one. My father was a dental laboratory owner, and dental laboratories make artificial teeth. And I fell in love with the industry, and in 2004 started Harvest Dental Products. I went in on the product side of the business and started the company in a 2-car garage. And it's been a wild ride ever since. The way that I would describe really what we do is we produce premium materials that are used to make artificial teeth, or in layman's terms, we're smile makers.
And so is it like any teeth, or is there a specific, do you have a specific niche in the types of people who use your particular teeth? How does that play out?
Sure. Well, we're in the fixed category. So you've got dentures, which are removable. And then you've got implants or crowns and bridges, which would be considered fixed. And so we live on the fixed side. And the types of materials that we produce are fixed denture materials. So high impact acrylic materials that basically function as denture teeth that are either screw retained on an implant system, or are cemented to an existing prepped tooth.
Got it. And so how does one grow in such a category, right? Like, it sounds like we have commonalities. My mother works for Trident Dental Labs, and you guys work with them, and I'm sure many other laboratories. Like, how do you grow in that business, and what are some of the challenges you faced as you've scaled up?
Well, I mean, to me, growth is universal, right? It's based on value, right? Value creation, value invention. And so for us, we're always trying to invent value. To me, quality is a feeling. And so, really our, modus operandi, or our focus, is to develop an experience, right? To innovate, to develop an experience that catches the customer by surprise with a value that they didn't expect. And
how do you communicate that in teeth? I mean, I have my share of crowns. I'm deathly afraid every time I go to the dentist, even though I have a fantastic dentist, Dr. Alan Stein here in Northridge. But just the whole thing of going to the dentist, is really scary. My palms get sweaty. I can't sleep sometimes. It's like Eminem on 8 Mile.
Yeah, it's not as bad as it seems, but I can definitely understand. So our target customer is the dental laboratory, so it's not the dentist. Uh-huh. And so ultimately, the way the value chain works is, you go to your dentist. Your dentist basically then prescribes a crown to you. You say okay. He then takes your impression, sends that impression to the dental laboratory, which is a B2B business that services the dentist on the production side. Dentists are service-based businesses. Dental laboratories are production-based businesses. That's where the teeth are actually made. And so, we currently, our market is the dental laboratory. And so what we're doing is we are competing with other companies in our space that are producing materials that they would fabricate into a final restoration that they would then send to the doctor. How do we then communicate that kind of value experience? Our brand really is wrapped around a term, and that term is refreshing. That's really kind of our brand focus. It's our brand story. And so, as you know, branding is way more about saying no than it is about saying yes, right? And when we talk about brand, we're talking about making an impression, making such an impact that the customer takes a piece of you with them because they want to refer to that feeling or experience, at a later time. And so for us to simply just sell a product isn't going to get us there, right? So what we do is we communicate to the market our why we exist, and we do that front-footed and aggressively. All of our advertising is basically wrapped around our philosophy for being. You communicate that enough, people start to understand it, and then now you have to win the trust game. And so where most of our competitors will communicate what they do, because we will always communicate confidently what we know about ourselves. And most companies have a marketing department that are really focused on function and less about spirit and soul. And because of that, they focus on features and benefits. They focus on, those types of things. And for us, we advertise the category because the category for us is, that represents the features and benefits, right? The category has its own expectations of the types of features and benefits of a product in a particular category. So what we do is we will advertise who we are. We'll make the bet that the customer will choose our product because we're the only company they actually know. And when you talk about refreshing, right, you have to, just being refreshed is you have to cut across an existing state of being. And so what we do in that regard is we will hide our product's greatest attribute so that the customer actually uncovers it. And
really,
thereby is refreshed. And so what happens then is you develop an incredible trust in that transaction, because now you've become the only company in the space that actually is authentic to what they say about themselves.
Can you speak to some of that? Like, what are some of the messages in your marketing? And so these are you're marketing to the dental laboratories, or you're marketing to
Correct.
the dentist. Yeah, you're marketing to the dental lab. So like, what are some of the types of messages you share in the marketplace? Because it's what's interesting to me is there's a very nurturing element to everything you're saying. I feel it just through this conversation. I feel the nurturing, and I imagine that the marketing is an expression of you. So now I get a sense of the nurturing that must go into the marketing. So I'm curious about what it actually says and how you communicate that.
Well, I appreciate that. Building a brand is a slow build. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand. And it took me some time to understand, right? You get impatient. And so, when you're building a brand, you're really planting seeds. So, our trademark, if you will, our slogan, our mantra is no respect for the status quo. And so what that does is that really does, even though we're talking about thinking outside the box, it puts us in the box in the sense that we are very limited to the types of products that we can offer the market, right? And if we do bring a product to market, we have to have a value disruption strategy tied to that product. So it keeps our product line very, very lean, and it keeps us, it keeps us disciplined with regards to the types of products that we can represent. And so ultimately we can say whatever we want. And what we do is we talk about, you know, knowing that, we were born with a thumbprint, and, branding is about being as unique as you are. Right. And so we have to live up to that, because our products ultimately become the mouthpiece that endorses our message. Right.
Okay.
So ultimately what we do is it starts with product development. Right. And it starts with understanding what categories we are going to be able to drive a refreshing value proposition, and what categories we're not going to be able to do that in.
Okay.
And so essentially what we do is we will look for mountains and molehills, right? Mountains, I would consider product categories where they have a strong leader. The brand has very, very strong market share, and it's a commoditized product that we feel like we can't, we wouldn't be able to separate ourselves in that way. And so traditionally we start with product categories that are neglected, that have no clear leader, but have a quality culture or standard that is attached to the products in that category. We approach the manifestation or execution of a refreshing brand strategy to three major components. The first is convention, understanding the market conventions around the category. So we take the products that are, let's say, the top 5 products in the category. We try to understand what they all do in the same manner.
So category in this case would be what? Different types of teeth, or what? Like what?
Product categories. So let's say we have a product called Super Peg, which actually is just a stabilizing paste, a high heat stabilizing paste.
Okay.
Basically, you would inject into the ceramic crown before you would fire it.
Got it.
In the oven. That would then become a crown.
Okay.
This keeps it on a peg so that it doesn't fall off and get damaged.
Got it. Okay. So the paste. So now we're talking about the paste. Okay.
We're talking about the paste, right? Or any product. This is,
Sure.
any product for harvest. But let's talk about that. Basically, or actually, we can talk about our multi-layer material. That is a 10-layer incisal gradient material. So it's got layers in it. Sure. That is cleaned out of CAD CAM.
Sure. Okay.
Either way, any of these products, it's a universal concept, and it can work for any product anywhere.
Sure.
Understanding the market conventions in a particular product category. So really becoming obsessed it's becoming obsessed with the attributes of the competitive product in that category that function or behave the same.
Okay.
They're all good products. They all do what they're supposed to do.
Yep.
Right. And so we have to understand that, because the moment we can understand that, now we know the box we need to think outside of.
Yep.
The convention becomes the catalyst for differentiation. Got it?
Yep.
And so, and then we have to have a vision. Now, our vision is the attribute, refreshing. Okay.
And how are you doing this research? Like, is it observational? Do you do full market research? Like, how do you do this? Because this seems very specific.
With regards to the methodology?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm a student. I'm constantly learning. The disruption methodology comes from Jean-Marie Drew of TBWA.
Okay.
The global brand agency, the agency for Apple.
Sure.
They kind of popularized this disruption model. And ultimately, it's about identifying the catalyst for differentiation rather than just trying to be different. It's actually a measured process where you understand where you feel like you can meet the customer at that intersection of clarity and surprise.
So are you doing this as a measured process, or is it more observational? That's what I'm trying to get to.
I would say it's more observational, and like anything else, it's a bet.
Got it.
Right. at the end of the day, what we're really doing, or what I'm really doing, is reverse engineering myself. What would catch me off guard if I
Sure.
could produce this type of value intrusion, a benefit that the customer may not expect? What would kind of tickle me?
So how do you do that with dental with this material?
With this paste? So
Yeah, that sounds like so.
okay. So super peg basically is a high heat, what we would call peg putty, which basically stabilizes the crown on firing pins
Okay.
during the burning process, the firing process.
Okay.
Ceramic it turns into glass, and now you've got a ceramic crown.
Sure.
So what we do again is when we took all of these products, we identified the convention that all of them were great. They all work great. But they all did one thing. They left a residue on the inside of the crown. And so after every crown was fired, the technician would have to get up out of his seat, go to a sandblasting unit, and sandblast the inside of the crown.
Got it.
To divest it.
Okay.
The reason is because the guy that developed this product initially basically was a tinkerer. He found a insulating material that is used for firewalls. So they would spray it on the inside of walls, and when it gets exposed to heat, it rigidizes.
Okay. Interesting.
What this also did was provide a high heat material that was a refractory material that didn't contaminate ceramic, that he would be able to inject into the crown and actually stabilize the crown on the pin, because when a crown would fall off these little pins, or little toothpicks, you would lose a whole day's of work.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
Right. So they all had this ingredient in there because everybody just copied everybody else. And that's what the status quo is, right?
Okay.
Follow the leader. And so again, no respect for the status quo is understanding the status quo and then going your own way. And so what we were able to do was identify a material that we could develop. And I developed it myself, and I'm not a chemist, but I obviously, had some help with some chemists, and over 5 sleepless nights developed a product that would actually fire like the others, but literally fire at the end of it like a pillow. So you would take tweezers and pluck it out.
Got it. So that was the innovation right there.
That's the innovation. So if we go through kind of the methodology, the convention is, again, so you've got convention, you've got vision, and then you've got disruption. Convention is all the products work great, which is the opportunity. But they all leave a residue, and nobody has asked the question, why does it have to be this way?
Right.
And so when we identify the attribute that we want to manifest, right, when we want to bring the brand alive, right, and we're talking about refreshing the customer's day in a positive way, that's the way that we're going to do it. They're going to find out. We're not going to tell them. We're going to withhold the product's greatest attribute.
Really?
Advertise the category. We're going to say the methodology of harvest lives in the category of peg putties.
Got it. I get it. So basically, the plot twist is the unexpected delight.
Correct. Surprise and delight. Absolutely.
Surprise and delight.
Yep.
So do you find that? And so how, like, you get that type of feedback that that the customer, that the lab is like, holy cow, I didn't even realize this could happen. Are you getting that feedback?
That's how we've grown, and
got it.
Yeah, and that's it's like I said, building a brand is a slow build. It's not transactional, right? It's relational. And, as a small company starting in a 2-car garage, I got to say there were many valleys of insecurity that I had to cross over as I continued on with this ethos of building a brand that was remarkable. And by that, I mean that could be remarked about. And so that really is the story, is, impacting the customer to such an extent that they then share their experience with those whom they love in their circle, which most times will be other dental laboratory owners.
Sure.
And so,
okay.
just to kind of, summarize the, identifying the convention is the key, right? And that really starts with asking a ton of questions. It's a questionnaire process, right? Why do we always talk about lunch, or why do we always talk about brunch but never dinner?
Yeah.
That's a convention.
Sure.
That's a market convention that we can overturn.
Right.
Right. All of these peg putties burn out the same. They leave a residue. That becomes the convention that we overturn. The vision is the attribute, always attribute based. Right. We want to manifest a human attribute that, again, leaves the customer with a piece of us that they would want to refer to, at another particular time. Building that trust and that credibility and authenticity that what we say we actually do. The disruption is actually both innovation and also strategy. The innovation being, we've developed a product now that eliminates sandblasting entirely. The disruption is we keep our mouths shut. We make the bet that the customer is going to choose us because they know us or something about us that they don't know about the competitor, right? Which is our why. And then they uncover the value proposition like finding a treasure.
So if you're not touting the plot twist or the surprise and delight mechanism in your messaging, you're relying purely on word of mouth and testimonial to drive the undercurrent of that surprise and delight. So I guess my question is, for someone at some point, there's a point where you have to start, like you start the journey. How do you gain velocity within the marketplace in a situation where you've got a great product, the person's going to be surprised and delighted, but they're never going to know that until they make the purchase. So you have to do something that's interesting enough to get the purchase. Sure.
Well, I mean, look, obviously there's got to be some type of awareness campaign, right? Because you're having to communicate your why. So we've got to get the why out there.
Yeah.
And so, we do that through advertising. But to be honest with you, I mean, when I started the company in 2004, I mean, I didn't have a print advertisement until 2011. So I was, really, really kind of sweat equity, up until that time. And so my strategy, and that's a great question, Robert, really good question. My strategy was this. I knew that I could brand my philosophy and my identity in the spirit of Harvest Dental with the 45 reps within the distributor network. And if I could wow them, I could then scale that communication to the thousands that they communicate with every day.
So they're the gatekeepers.
So they are the gatekeepers. They are the current gatekeepers.
And that might change.
That will change. So if we go into the dealer system and I do a sales presentation and I make a promise and say, I promise you that your customers are going to thank you. And I know how crazy that sounds, and I'm sure you hear that from everybody. All I ask is that you trust me. And of course, to get positioning, right, you've got to present multiple things like margin advantage and stuff like that, right? So that It's worth their while to position it in front of a competitor product that they're already selling.
Yeah.
But the moment they started getting the thank yous, that was when we won. And that was really when the pebble became a snowball. And again, the layers grow over time. It's a long game, right? And you hear this from Gary Vaynerchuk all the time, right? Patience. And that's really what it's taken.
So we met. I reached out to you after I heard you on the Gary V podcast.
Correct.
Tell me about that experience you were in with Gary Vee and some brand growth strategies and some stuff. Tell me about some of that and what you took away and I think that's going to impact your marketing or wherever you want to go with it. What comes out of these experiences for you?
Well, first, I'm very glad that you contacted me because it's really been a pleasure, getting to know you, and understanding your business, which I think is amazing. I think you're doing an incredible job.
I appreciate that.
But I got to say, the experience with Gary Vee really was, if there's one word that I could use to describe it, it was dynamic and intense.
Mm-hmm.
He is in person as advertised, and after spending a considerable amount of time with him in a boardroom with his inner circle, his leadership team, I can confidently say that he will probably go down as one of the greatest entrepreneurial minds in our generation.
Yeah.
Basically, we our journey to his offices in Manhattan started with a relationship that I have with a company called Young Nails. And Young Nails and Harvest are both now Vayner Mentor companies. So Young Nails is a Vayner Mentors company that basically through the Sasha Group, which is a division of Brill Media. And what they do is they work with, dynamic brands in niche categories to unlock aggressive growth. And they have been very, very successful. They were actually just yesterday, their video was #1 on TikTok for its viral activity, which is amazing. And I've watched them just explode after their experience with Vayner. So obviously that piqued my interest. And I was also following Gary Vee on social media. They asked them, hey, who else do you know in the medical dental space? They recommended Harvest. And so they basically interviewed us, came here, did a site visit, and determined that we were a good fit for this product. The way it works, Robert, is it's basically, it's a kind of an investment consulting product. It's very innovative, actually. Mm-hmm. And so what they do is they will invest their inner circle. They will invest their leadership team. They will share their Rolodex and the knowledge in their hallways to identify the areas in your business where you might be stuck that would inhibit you from growing 300 to 400% year over year. Mm-hmm. They go through a process of understanding, first off, are you a brand? Is the CEO a visionary, an influencer in the space? Does he, do you have right product, right price, right time? Are you solvent? Do you have, resources to really grow? And when they determine that, they then will take you on as a client and then they will take a share of your growth for 3 years.
Wow.
A very, very fair deal, because they will only take what they grow, the percentage of what they grow, right, which is really interesting. Gary Vee, when I went into that meeting, I had some preconceived ideas of what I needed from him and where I wanted to take him in the discussion. And he basically came in and I would say blew my mind. Okay. The first thing that I will say about Gary is that number one, he understands the value chain of any industry and what links in that chain are exploited by the internet. Mm-hmm. In the same way that Uber has disrupted the taxi industry. Sure. What he'll do is he'll ask you the questions that determine what the value chain looks like. And he'll say, Sasha, these are your gatekeepers, and in order for you to win this game, you have to go to this chain, which is actually, in this case, the consumer.
Yeah.
And so, Gary has really directed us to brand our tooth materials to the consumer, based on an influencer strategy. Whereas instead of the dentist going to the laboratory and the laboratory choosing what material they want to use, the consumer goes into the dentist and says, "I want Harvest."
Big change.
Huge change.
It's a long term effort.
It's going to be another waiting game for sure.
And so it sounds like you're going to deploy that strategy.
We are going to deploy that strategy. And again, our product line is segmented, right? I mean, we've got tools for the trade, which have to stay in B2B.
Right.
But then we also have these, medical device materials that are premium materials that actually go in the mouth and look beautiful. And, we were able to share a video with the team at Vayner about it. But in the video, basically was with a patient that was getting our material put in her mouth at the dentist office, and she was in tears.
Why?
Because of how beautiful her smile looked.
Got it.
And this woman didn't smile because she just didn't have she didn't have teeth. She was completely edentulous. And that really, I think, was that was kind of the salt of the whole thing. And that was really, that drove the direction of, man, what you got here is an incredible opportunity because you have a vanity product.
Right.
And this is actually, this is an opportunity to be the Louis Vuitton of teeth.
Huh. That's cool.
Yeah. It's totally radical. And I got to be honest, it shook me a little bit.
Right.
I had, I understood it. And then again, as I'm sure, every entrepreneur can relate to, it's like all of a sudden you start doubting your own abilities to achieve this huge idea. And you start thinking about the size of your company and the resources that you have, and you start almost you almost start to disprove your ability to do it. And he said something very interesting, and I said, maybe I'm thinking too small. He says, no, you're not thinking too small. By nature, what we try to do is view everything in our immediate interest.
Okay.
And I thought, that's interesting because I'm thinking about this as a now thing. And I'm like, well, I'm not in a position to do this now. And what he's saying is what you need to do is walk towards that vision.
Right.
And then again, you come back to your own journey and you go, actually, yeah, that's how I started.
I think one of the most interesting things that I've heard repeatedly from Gary Vaynerchuk and others, but a lot of it is from him, is this idea of becoming a media company first, hiring an editorial director. And it's so interesting because I find that stuff really fun. And we're sort of getting into a cadence now where we're deploying content and whatnot and venturing out of the stuff that we're normally doing. So I think if you like storytelling, it's probably going to be a really fun endeavor for you to deploy over the next few years.
Absolutely. And so part of this process, right, is they do a full internal audit of your company, and they basically will help you develop this internal, right, kind of media department by, interviewing interns. And I mean, they've got such a wide network.
Yeah.
That there's people in Brea, right, California, that are just waiting to be part of this.
Absolutely. Like if I'm like there, we're working. One of my great friends, his name is Anthony. He has a kid. His name is Cooper, and Cooper's helping me with our social media. And he's good, but he's a little uncouth. He does, we need to kind of work on a few things, but overall he's really good. And I'm just realizing there's probably like a whole generation of young people. I mean, this kid is 20, so I mean, I didn't know anything when I was 20, right?
I mean,
Like I just figured out I'm alive at like 30, right? Like I don't know anything. And so the kid's actually doing work at 20 is incredible.
yeah, he's doing
But I
pretty
imagine there's like a massive industry about to develop where if this becomes as it appears to be the sort of backbone of content is going to be an editorial desk at every company. There's a ton of opportunity for kids like Cooper to build an entire career for the next 40 years off of the moment that we're in now and as it develops. It's really actually kind of fascinating.
I fully agree, and I think it is fascinating. It's very fascinating, and it's a whole new category of value that one can provide to a company that didn't exist 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And you hear everybody talk about, well, there's digital is kind of destroying jobs and this and that. Well, as you've just explained, it's actually creating new jobs.
Yeah.
And so we're really looking forward to diving into that. So some interesting kind of back to that question about kind of our experience with Gary. So it was really interesting. They ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
They ask a lot of questions, very, very insight driven, and really just gathering intelligence. And then what they begin to do is then they came here and spent 2 days with us, and they did basically kind of stakeholder interviews. So they interviewed, different people within the company at different levels of management, from warehouse pick and packers to senior vice presidents.
Yeah.
And obviously asked us a ton of questions around vision, mission, just some real core kind of principles. And you actually realize, as a business owner, how much you don't know, just with regards to the fundamentals.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where you're like, yeah, I actually never developed an elevator strategy or an elevator pitch,
Yeah.
And so what I'd like to share is kind of the 5 growth pillars that they've identified
Okay.
for Harvest,
Yeah.
that they feel like are going to unlock us as a company.
Okay, let's hear it. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah. So the first one is organizational culture and communication.
Okay.
And basically, what that means is, they're going to develop a communication strategy tied to a fundamental message and a practical outworking of that message.
Okay.
Organization wide. And what this says is a little kind of summary, but it says positive organizational culture is an often overlooked source of business growth. If people are happy, they stay, and the longer tenured employees are better in their role. Plus, it's just the right thing to do. And this building block will provide our strategies for expanding on the things you're already doing correctly, share our thoughts on where there's room for improvement, and flag the areas to watch as you scale up. And so what's interesting is they see this as a scale opportunity.
Yeah.
Because again, if they're going to take you from A to Z, we're talking 300% growth, which is really what their focus is. I mean, they're the way that they're viewing my company is very different from the way that I view it every day.
How do they view it?
Well, I think, ultimately they understand the potential pitfalls on the way up. And so they know, based on Gary's experience and, the acumen in the room, right, and the experience in the hallways, and I think their engagement with other entrepreneurs and entrepreneurships, they know what departments are neglected, and most times it's team related and it's talent. What we do as entrepreneurs is, and it's a lot of times, especially in my experience, on the way up, You hire green because you're limited with resources,
Sure.
right? You're mentoring a lot.
Yeah.
And at some point you reach, your department leaders reach the Peter principle, and, everybody has a level of incompetency, and you also realize your own very quickly,
Oh yeah.
as a CEO. And, in 2016 for me was there, but, it's very interesting. So they've identified this organizational culture and communication as a building block. So they're going to really put a lot of time and energy into helping us develop a culture, which I thought I had, and have now realized that actually I don't have the culture that I'm going to need to get me to where I'm going to be.
That's super interesting.
Right. And that is very, it's insightful when you understand it that way, because it reveals the change that you can't see.
Yeah.
Building block number 2, brand fundamentals. The most powerful stories in your industry are those of the patients, but you don't have a direct relationship with them, right? Because we're B2B. By expanding our audience to include them, we can begin to shift power away from the gatekeepers, right? And to be a patient-facing brand, we'll need to review brand fundamentals to adjust for their inclusion without neglecting your direct customers and important stakeholders.
Sure.
So what they're going to do is they're going to align our mission and vision to be more, consumer-centric, audience mapping, brand positioning, reviewing the brand identity from scratch, and also the brand architecture.
Wow.
Which is very interesting. Building block number 3 is going to be around marketing strategy, communication architecture, right? Marketing mix evaluation recommendations. We're looking at, digital channel strategy, digital content pillars, right? Teaching us about what to say and how to say it and where to say it. And then also looking at, kind of budget rationale, helping us with our budgeting. Where are you spending now that we actually need to turn that faucet off and redirect those funds here, right?
Yep.
Building block number 4 is product offering and distribution. They're going to basically look at our complete product offering. They're evaluating our customer relationships and providing insights there. Looking at our dealer network and optimizing and rationalizing, that distribution kind of funnel.
Do you find, Sasha, do you find that you have customers that are like, do you have this in your business where the customers, the high value customers and low value customers, and like the ones that are maybe low value but take up the most time? Like, is that a thing in your business?
Well, I think it's, in every business, right? Everybody has an 80-20 rule, right? 20% of our customers account for 80% of our business. We do. And I'll also say that I just because they buy from us does not mean that they're our customer. I say that because for us, our customers are those who believe the same things that we believe, right? And so, for us, we're going to market to the fringe. We're going to market to the edges. We don't market to the mass, because we're a premium brand. Again, it's part of that saying no, which is difficult. And so, we know that, we deal with very, very large customers. I wouldn't say that those customers, outside of price, would recognize maybe, a value proposition that our true partners or user community would recognize. And that's the difference between a loyal customer and a customer that's just buying the product because maybe we haven't given them a reason to leave, but we haven't necessarily given them, a reason to stay, and we may lose them to a price point battle at some point in the future. That's just,
got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So they're, and they look at all of that, as well. And then the 5th building block, which is very interesting, is personal brand development.
Okay.
So
for you.
This is for me.
That's dope.
So yeah, so that was exciting, right? And so, what they've identified is that, because I'm the visionary and I'm my DNA is all over the brand, that this is a vulnerability currently and a real opportunity going forward. What does that mean? That means a digital strategy for Sasha. That means content pillars for Sasha. And that means hero and micro content planning.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm doing a lot of that stuff right now for me as the face of Brill Media. Certainly, the name of our business is my name in it. And one of the things I just recently had a really good conversation with someone who's an expert on the SEO side, and he said placing a photo and a signature and a message, a statement message from me, is on the website is like good. Like it helps in a lot of different ways.
So on that note, I have to share something with you. And I don't even know if I shared this with you prior, but you sent me a video message
Yeah.
in the email.
Yes.
And I have to tell you, that was the first time that's ever happened to me.
Okay.
And talk about value invention.
Yeah.
Talk about convention, vision, and disruption.
Yeah.
To me, Robert, that was a value intrusion.
Okay.
And when I got that, I actually forwarded that to our director of brand experience.
Oh, good.
And I said, check this out.
Yeah.
I thought that was so interesting. And I thought it was so cool because you took the time to be human, to humanize your message. And I just got to say that as a first impression, I was incredibly positively impacted by that. And
appreciate that.
And it was very, very cool.
I was so just for a little bit of context, I was listening to the podcast where Gary was talking to you guys, and you were talking, and I didn't even finish the podcast episode, and I filmed this thing at 9:30 at night. I was like, I just got to get it out. It
was amazing, and I appreciated it. It was really something that I appreciated the gesture.
Cool. Well, Sasha, look, I think this is super interesting. As we wrap up, let me ask you, I'm a foodie. I like a lot of good food. I have an Instagram account for food. You're in Brea. What do you like to eat, or wherever you might travel? What's your favorite thing that comes to mind?
Well, man, I'm telling you, I got to go back to Glendale for this one, man.
Okay.
Rafi's place.
Rafi's. Second time. You're the second person to mention Rafi's. I love Rafi's.
Yep, Rafi's place. That is, I would say, probably. I love Rafi's place. Carousel.
I haven't been there.
Okay. Carousel on brand. So the original one is in Hollywood. Used to go there with my grandparents all the time. Real authentic Armenian food. I'm Armenian, but I would say Mediterranean food is probably my favorite. Tacos are a real short second.
Okay. My favorite tacos are Mexicali, right by Dodger Stadium on Figueroa and like where the 110 on-ramp is.
Wow. So there's a favorite taco place.
Mexicali, incredible stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. Next time I'm watching the Blue, man, I'm gonna have to go to Mexicali.
Definitely. Awesome. Sasha, how can, if people want to reach out to you, how do they reach out to you?
Well, I mean, I'm on social media, so I've got a Facebook account, Sasha Der Avanessian. My Instagram is Sasha Derav, SASHADERAV. I'm also on LinkedIn. I blog. I share my journal basically. Through social media, and that's been an interesting growth opportunity for me. Just kind of getting comfortable with throwing my thoughts to the wind, and I've enjoyed that. And so, obviously, if there's any of your listeners have any questions, they can reach me on my email as well, or DM me, Sasha@harvestdental.com. Happy to provide value wherever I can. If I can answer any questions or share some of my stories with regards to scaling the business, some of the pitfalls that I've had to overcome, and some of the fears that I feel like I've gained victory over.
Let's talk about that. And that's definitely. There's two questions. I want to talk about those elements of some of the things you've overcome. I also want to ask you about. Let's start there, and I have a question about how the branding moving forward. But let's start there. Like what? Like I think you told me when we spoke that you had a couple years where your revenue was sort of like the same, and then within like a year or two, it like skyrocketed. Like, can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So, since the inception in 2004, Harvest Dental has not had a year that we have not grown double digits. It took me 8 years to hit $1 million in revenue. And it was an incredible phenomenon, and it taught me a huge lesson. But every year since, it was $1 million a year. And what happened was 2016. It was where I ultimately went to school. 2015 was our best year ever.
Okay.
Like the other years were, but this one was a real good year. I mean, we'd grown again, we have an average product price of under $20. We'd grown like 1.5 million a year. My advertising budget was less than $100,000 a year. It was just that we had just hit this critical mass of brand acceptance, and you could feel the momentum. And man, it was exciting. I would say probably around August, man, I could kind of start to feel the walls shake a little bit. The windows were rattling, and I started to feel like something was about to pop. And ultimately, what happened is I myself had reached a level of I had reached a level of incompetency. Really, I had stopped growing as a CEO.
Okay.
And I failed to identify this truth: you will only grow as high as your lowest wall.
Tell me about that.
Departmental structure, accountability systems, management acumen. These things were at that point had become exploited. And in 2016, my operation crashed. We fell into detrimental back orders. We fell into cash flow issues because we were not able to invoice, because we were not able to ship. And while this was happening, it was like the tidal wave kept coming. It's like I couldn't stop it. I couldn't, it was as if I was in the ocean and I could not catch a breath, right? And so what I realized is that I had lost the ability to see the key performance indicators, to identify what really were the vitals in my business. And I became nearsighted.
And what are the vitals?
Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, of course, first off, you're looking for service level, right? I hadn't really realized that, our service level was decreasing, and it was becoming more and more difficult to fulfill our orders coming in.
Got it.
Strategic partnerships. I hadn't shored up second and third sources around, critical components. And so we ran into an issue where we fell into a major backorder situation from a supplier partner, and I had a hard time finding a replacement for that product, for that component. The talent was a major issue. The people that I had in my production area that were managing while I was scaling brand development, business development,
right?
They weren't scaling the departments at the same speed, right? And so we had no problem making it rain. Our problem was catching the water.
Right.
And when you're expending resources to make it rain,
right,
but you're not catching the water,
right,
you got some real issues.
yeah,
And so we went from a 30% EBITDA margin in 2015 to a 1% EBITDA margin.
really,
It completely, the whole bottom fell out.
wow,
And
that's
I'll
incredible.
tell you, the power of brand was what ultimately saved us, because the market forgave us.
Huh.
I had very little customer attrition during that time.
Is it because of you? Do you think that the marketplace knows you and your reputation and your background? Is it the brand? Do you think it's the brand's your business or you?
Well, I believe it was the brand, because again, I can't scale to 5,000 laboratories. I mean,
Right.
Most of the market probably doesn't even know who I am, to be honest.
Uh-huh.
But it was, I think, the goodwill of the brand.
Yeah.
It was, at its purest sense, unconditional love. It's any humanization factor.
Right.
Right. When you humanize human attributes that are attractive, like generosity, like
Sure.
humility,
Sure.
right? When you invest in the customer experience and it's acknowledged, value recognition is incredibly important, right? Putting yourself in a position to deploy value that can be recognized.
Yeah.
Right? You gain that level of trust and loyalty. And yes, we probably lost some orders, but we didn't lose customers.
Sure. And so
26 to grow.
So 2016, tough year. Did top line sales grow? They did, right?
Top line sales grew.
Got it.
But we put the brakes on. So we actually grew 10%, but we were, historically 30% growth.
Sure.
Top line. It was really, really aggressive. And then, we were able to so 2016, 2016 was like the oh shit year.
Yeah.
And that was where, I had to face myself in the mirror. And I remember looking myself, it was like 3 a.m. I remember looking at myself in the mirror and asking myself, do you belong here?
Wow.
What's interesting is during this time, we were actually being courted for acquisition by 2 major players in the industry. And I was ready to sell it. I was ready to divest, join another man's team. And kind of that was the route that I felt like I needed to take, because I had lost my confidence in the process.
And what happened?
I prayed.
Okay.
I prayed and I actually had what you would call a picture in my mind, or a vision.
Okay.
At this point, I had fallen into debt, about $250,000, and I saw a product, and I saw a logo on the box, and I saw a product, and I knew exactly what it was. It was so clear that I went ahead and I invested $10,000 in a prototype. I then called the company whose logo was on the box. I pitched them on the idea. They said, "When can we see a sample?" I said, "You'll have it on your desk tomorrow morning." I shipped it next day air. I ended up closing the deal for the exact amount of $258,000. My margin was 90%.
No. Okay.
It cost me $17 to make.
Wow.
I took that money. I paid off the debt. I was debt free by
In one
October
fell swoop.
2016.
Whew.
It's an unbelievable story.
And did you create a new product, or what did you actually
create a new product? It
Wow.
wasn't it wasn't a new innovation. It was a product that was a hole in the product line of one of the largest dental companies in the world.
And you just filled it.
And I developed it. I manufactured it. I knew exactly what I needed to do. It was harvest quality. It was a private label product, so it wasn't a harvest product. I make it just for them. And I recently just got an order for the same product, a reorder. This time it was, close to $300,000.
Wow.
But at the end of the day, that was the turning point for me. And if you can imagine the element of confidence that I rose up with in that moment, and I felt like I can do this. So 2017 was the restructuring year.
Okay.
And I had to identify where I went wrong. Like what happened, right? And so really it was going through a triage type exercise. And I basically looked at my complete value chain within the company and identified what those were and began to create what I called signature process silos.
Okay.
These are the internal processes of my business that define me internally. I know what defines us externally.
Sure.
But what actually defined me internally? I didn't have an answer for that.
Yep. So you're talking about your process, your standard operating procedure.
Correct, right? And so we went through the process of becoming ISO 9001 and then ISO 13485 certified, which is a global quality standard, the highest global quality standard available. We got certified. And then from a management standpoint and from a visibility standpoint, I created basically 6 signature processes, which were finance and accounting, manufacturing and innovation, sales and service, marketing and brand, and planning and operations.
Okay.
Each of these silos would then have a visionary and a champion. The visionary in most of these cases was me.
Okay.
But what I was able to do then is I was able to put my name here and know that my job is to replace me as the visionary in this process.
Right.
And so then I focused my hiring activity on finding the right executor or champion for that process.
Yeah.
And so every day was a signature process day for me from a management standpoint. So on Mondays, I focused on finance and accounting.
Got it.
And I looked at it, gave me an opportunity to take a deep dive into that process, to understand my financials, to look for the right help, to find a consultant that could help me in this process, which I would set up my calls on the Monday. I would have my meetings with anything that had to do with that process on the Monday.
Wow.
And I was able to bucket and drive clarity, right? And actually kind of allow myself to pull out of the weeds and see a horizon. And I was able to do this with every signature process. And then to the point to where I found the right people then to replace myself as the visionary and now operate more as kind of I went from kind of an operating CEO to more of a visionary CEO. That was really my trajectory as my own maturity in overcoming my own Peter principle with regards to being a chief executive officer of an organization.
That's fascinating. Did you go to business school?
I did. I went to University of Redlands. I studied management. I don't feel like I learned anything, though. I think I learned everything in 2016, to be honest with you.
That's where the EBITDA went.
That's where, exactly. That actually makes me feel a lot better, man. Thank you. I've never looked at it that way before. But and I read some books. I read a book called Growing Pains, which helped me. I also read a book called The Messy Middle. And again, I mean, I just don't believe in experts. I'm not an expert in anything. And part of my transition was in 2015. I think I started to believe I was. And what I realized in 2016 was sit your ass down, dude, and start to learn again.
That's amazing.
And that's really what happened. And so, again, over the course of 3 years, we went from, and not only that, Robert, but we were operating in 4 buildings. We had outgrown our existing building. We were operating in 4 different buildings. We didn't have the leadership breadth to really manage those buildings, those operations. But the miraculous story in all this is in 1 year, I went from my weakest financial position and most vulnerable, kind of environment as an entrepreneur, where I literally was close to growing myself out of business, to my strongest position in my career as an entrepreneur, financially, brand equity, and also identity formation with regards to me. Yeah. I became a better person through it all.
What does the next 2 to 5 years look like for you guys? And I'm specifically interested in when you end up going to the consumer and marketing, are you going to remain as Harvest Dental, or are you going to go to, actually, as I think about this question, it probably doesn't make sense to create a different consumer brand, right? Like it'll stay Harvest Dental, right?
So actually, and that's a great question. From the consumer brand standpoint, we are definitely, I mean, we have to rethink everything.
Really?
Harvest Dental would be, the legal entity.
Sure.
But as you know, right, brand is a soul, and you can't behave like a B2B company and try to, be a B2C company.
Sure.
So we're looking at developing a focused brand that has its unique point of differentiation, and its unique brand essence and message.
Really?
Yeah, for sure.
That's fascinating.
For sure.
A whole new can of worms.
I'm sorry?
That's a whole new can of worms, not just marketing to a new segment. You've got to actually develop a whole completely new brand.
Correct. And that is one of the pillars that will be addressed, through the Vayner partnership, through the partnership with Gary. Gary's involved in the development of the growth plan. And so, he said it, and we're buying in, and now his team is putting together, that process. Where do we see ourselves in 3 to 5 years? The first thing I would say is staying true to ourselves, staying true to our brand identity, staying true to our vision of interrupting the customer's day in a positive way.
Yeah.
That never changes. Obviously, as we open up the consumer channel, looking at additional, disruption opportunities there. I would also say that, aggressive growth, and that will really, I think, be predicated on our ability to humanize our brand message, and also create inspiration as a product. And like all products, a product needs a value essence, it needs packaging, and it needs distribution. And that becomes our, I would say, social media offering.
Inspiration as a product. I think, as I think about this, I don't think there's any other brand doing this. So just by the first mover advantage alone, I think you're going to have immense impact.
I think so. Again, if if we stand by our mantra of no respect for the status quo, right? We have to be that. And this definitely, I think, puts us in that, I would say on that track, right? Is developing a unique product that people are going to not just need, but want in their mouth.
Sure. Sasha, this has been super interesting. I wish you all the best, and I hope we can keep in touch.
Robert, it will. I would love to keep in touch. I think you've got a great podcast, and more so, I think just a great understanding of all this stuff. And I look forward to a relationship and learning from you as well. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Sasha.